TCI is brought to you by Spendthrift Stallion Lord Nelson, the brilliantly fast 3-time Grade 1 winner by Sire of Sires Pulpit, new for 2018.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Breeders' Cup. Alongside Joel Cunningham, I'm John Siegel. Well, Joel, this is a show where we're going to talk about the Europeans. We're going to run down the turf top fives. It's fitting that we're wearing our blue because we're going to be talking about a lot of Europeans. Yeah. The pre-entries came out this week, and we see a record 46 horses that are trained overseas coming over to run in this year's Breeders' Cup. Tell me, what are your first impressions on the pre-entries?
First impressions were I spent a lot of time on YouTube watching European races the last few days, John, particularly since the pre-entries came out. I mean, up till wee hours in the morning, really trying to study these horses. So much European or foreign participation, trying to understand their form. You know, we do this every year. We talk about these Europeans. They're, you know, obviously racing over there is something Americans don't pay attention to all that much, not most of us. And it's different. I mean, a lot of them are running, the ground's different there. Yeah. You know, they're running over right hand, you know, elbow courses, straightaways. So you have to really try to do your best to discern which ones are at the top of their game, which ones are the most well-meant. Try to make some sense of their form over there, which two-year-olds most notably, because I think they're going to have an impact again in the two-year-old races. You know, who's going to appreciate more ground, maybe the turns, which ones are developing, that sort of thing. So spend a lot of time on YouTube because I have.
I'll tell you what, there was one horse that I wish was coming over. Unfortunately, she's not, and that's Winx. Joel, she's one of the best horses in the world. Yeah. She's going for a record. She's going to try to get, you know, 3 in a row in the Cox Plate. Yeah. That's a horse that I hope that, you know, maybe next year we can try to get the horse like that over, because that's really what the Breeders' Cup is all about. It's the World Championships. We're trying to get the best horses to come over and run in these races.
It's just so hard for the Southern Hemisphere horses to come because, I mean, literally they're on a different part of the year down there that we are. And you know, you always get you get some Japanese participation on occasion, you get the European contingent coming, but to get the Southern Hemisphere horses is so difficult. But you're right, how fun would it have been to see Winx versus Lead Eli in that filly Mare Turf?
It really would be fun, and we'll see what happens next year. But let's talk about the horses who are coming over, and let's start off with the Juvenile Turf. You mentioned that, you know, you got to really look at those two-year-olds, and that two-year-old form is really hard. Let's talk about the top 5 that you have right now for the Juvenile Turf.
Yeah, let's actually, okay, Juvenile Turf here, the boys will start. You know, I think U.S. Navy flag, first preference for this race. He looks like Coolmore's best. I mean, here's a colt that is coming out of a very key two-year-old race that a lot of the top two-year-olds point for, and that's the Dewhurst, John, at Newmarket. You know, you just look at his form. He's a back-to-back Grade 1 winner. He won the Middle Park 2 back at Newmarket as well. Comes in on a 3-race win streak, and it's just really on top of his game. He's run 10 times this year. You know, maybe that's a little bit concerning. However, his form has trended in the right direction. I just think when you look at his pedigree, I mean, you look at that Misty for Me, that Galileo mare. They bred a lot of nice horses out of that mare. War Front, so the two-year-old precocity makes sense. This horse has only been 7 furlongs, but I think he'll handle a mile just fine, which is what he's going to be asked to do here. And the thing I like about him, John, is he has speed. You know, one thing about these Europeans when they come over, particularly with two-year-old races, I think where they get in trouble is not class. They get in trouble because they get shuffled back. They don't have the tactical speed to compete with, you know, some of the American colts. We can think of, you know, our winner last year was a speed horse. A lot of times we win these races, we take a speed advantage, particularly with these fast courses out in California. This horse has speed as part of his game, and I think it, no question, makes him the horse to be. Here's your sail topper last year at Keeneland September, the Half to Beholder, and he's just getting better. He was 50-1 last time out. They put blinkers on him, and he ran a bang-up race behind U.S. Navy flag. Now, he's second preference in here. I think that because of that dirt pedigree, they may try the Breeders' Cup Juvenile on dirt, and I'm very interested to see how he runs in there. Obviously, he'll have to face Bolt d'Oro, but he's good enough for me. I think he belongs in the top 5. And then you just have some other good Group 1 type form from major connections. You know, Massar, you have Beckford, another horse that I think is interesting here. And I'm going to throw an American on the list. It's probably Chad Brown's best hope. He's a closer. He probably needs the right setup, but I think he's Chad Brown's best two-year-old colt, and that's Voting Control.
All right, and I know I started in and said Juvenile Fillies. Sorry about that, but let's go ahead and talk about the Juvenile Fillies Turf now. Yeah. Give me your top 5 in that division, please.
Actually, I think you said Juvenile. I was assuming the Fillies first, and that was my bad. But yeah, we'll go to the top 5 for the Juvenile Fillies Turf. And again, you're going to see European dominance. And I think this race, from a class standpoint, could be better than the colt race. Let's just talk about Chad Brown's Voting Control. Both of his, you know, we had him in the top 5 for the colts. He had 2 buyers in the 70s. His best filly rushing fall, his 2 buyers in the mid-80s. So if you're just going off of buyer numbers, this filly's shown that she's the fastest 2-year-old turf horse in Chad Brown's barn. So I mean, that tells you this quality of this field's good. Happily, Group 1 winner last time out, beat the Colts, including Massar, who I had in the top 3 in the Juvenile Turf, if you remember the last graphic. September, I mean, you want to talk about a pedigree. She's a little filly, but deep impact at a peeping fawn. I mean, you don't get bred in the purple anymore than that, and she's improved as she's gone farther. Her mile effort last time out was very good. September's a filly that I think is very interesting here, but I think this race starts with Happily again. The thing I like when I look at the YouTube race is Happily is in razor sharp form. She beat the boys last time out in a legitimate race. She's a big, hardy filly, love her physically, and she has speed. I think that's key. Some of these good Coolmore horses coming over this year, they have tactical speed and they're in great form. That's why I think Happily is the filly to beat in here.
All right, let's move now then to the filly and mare turf. And in here, I think this is the USA's one of our best chances to show up in this race and to do well. And I see you got her in at number 1. That's Lady Eli.
Very intriguing thing about this race is it's a 1.125 miles. Normally, this filly and mare turf is a 1.25 miles, 1.3 miles. But the way Del Mar's turf course is set up, they have to cut it back to 1.8 miles. So I think you're going to see some milers participate in this because I think just another 1/8 of a mile. You know, I think this could be a milers type race, particularly over a firm turf course. You see Roly Poly, you know, it's probably more of a miler. I think this is the furthest she'll ever have to go. Her first preference is in this race. It makes her very interesting. Wahida is the Darley filly, 3-year-old, shown some ability. She was going to run in the QE2 at Keeneland, and they scratched her after a couple works there and instead are potentially going to work up to this. She's interesting, but to me, the race really goes to these 3 here. Your defending champ. Now, one thing about Queen's Trust and Lady Eli, we remember it came down to a nose last year. Queen's Trust, Frankie Dettori came roaring on the outside. Remember, this filly looked great in the post parade and got Lady Eli on the wire. That was at a 1.25 miles. At a 1.8 miles, I like Lady Eli's tactical speed. I think that gives her an edge in here. And Rhododendron is another Coolmore filly that's in tremendous form right now, has some form from 1 mile to 1.25 miles. So I think she belongs in here. I actually like her a little better than Queen's Trust.
Well, you talk a lot on the turf racing. You talk about the ground. You talk about, you know, what kind of turf are we going to expect. You know, what's the weather looking like out there? I heard it's really hot, really dry right now. What's it going to look like on Breeders' Cup?
Well, and you bring up a good point. I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me to predict the weather, obviously, this far out. It's California. You'd expect it to be pretty good. But what's interesting about having 40-something foreign-trained horses come over, you have to like that trend, John, because the thing I heard forever about Europeans coming over is they didn't feel like it was fair to run against Americans over these California turf courses that are short, firm, they have no cut in the ground, sharper turns, they run a lot faster time, speed, carries. I think they like the bigger courses like Belmont, like Churchill, a little colder weather, bigger turns, more cut in the ground, more weather element there. The California courses, the fact that they're sending so many over to run at Del Mar, I think is very encouraging. But I do think Americans may have some tactical advantages in some races, particularly Lady Eli in that race.
All right, you're talking about the mile just a second ago. Let's go ahead and jump
right.
right.
How's the filly mare turf?
Let's go ahead. Yeah, but you were saying some horses that you know might like that mile distance better.
Yeah.
Let's talk now about the mile, and let's talk about another horse that we think has a huge chance for Team USA, and that is World Approval. Sorry. Yeah. Tell me what you think about his chances in here.
I just, you know, again, you look at his form right now, and you look at the fact he really honed in at a mile. I think this is what he's been bred to do this whole time, and he has tactical speed. He's popped 2 108 buyers training into this. Mark Cassie has shown that he can train a top miler on the turf. I just love his profile. I mean, normally I like the Europeans in here. Not this year. He is sort of that wise Dan Tepin to me that I think can make an impact in this race and deserves on his tactical speed. And there might be some pace in here. You know, I'm not saying he's going to get, you know, capitalize on a slow pace and get a tactical edge over the deep closing Europeans. I think there's going to be some speed in here, but his ability to be placed in a congested field with that tactical speed for Julian to be able to put him where he needs to be and finish off of it, I just think he's top class right now. Ribchester's the best miler in Europe. Again, he's got a lot of soft turf form though, and he's been running hard all year. So Ribchester, you know, the horse is going to take a little money. I like World Approval a little better. Churchill, I think their first preference is the Classic, but he's Coolmore's probably one of their most talented horses this year, obviously, the way they've campaigned him. I think a mile is okay for him. He won some classics at a mile in Europe earlier this year against 3-year-old. Zelzal, I think he's a live long shot. He's got really good French 1 mile form. It's been a little, it's been spotty form this year. You look at his form, I think he's a little better, maybe earlier in the year. He's favorite last time out and he disappointed, but that was at 7/8. I think he's a true miler with a big turn of foot. If they go a little fast up here, I think as a long shot, Zelzals has that back class. He's run fast enough to make him interested. And then Lancaster Bomber, he'll be another long shot. First preference is here in the mile. They're also going to cross center in the dirt mile as a potential in terms of the pre-entries. But up and coming 3-year-old, the key for him is firm ground. Every soft ground or yielding course he's run over, he runs horrible. When he gets on firm footing, he's always in the top 1, 2, 3, and he puts a good account for himself in. It doesn't matter what the class level he runs against. So Lancaster Bomber, I think, belongs in the top 5.
Yeah, he's run really well in a few grade 1s here recently. I think he's placed in maybe 4 grade 1s. Let's go ahead and talk about the turf. And here's a horse that I always see showing up, whether, whatever you see European racing, and that's Highland Real. This horse just seems like he's just always got his name in print. Tell me, what do you think about his chances in here?
Same thing. Firm turf course, and he has speed as a weapon, which is key. You remember last year at Santa Anita, the turf course was playing speed all day. He got out there by himself, and he just ran away from the field. This year, I do think there's more contested pace in here. When I start looking at the pre-entries, there's going to be more pace in this year's Breeders' Cup Turf than there was last year, which I think, Beach Patrol, some of those horses that are tactical enough and in good form to go with Highland Real early, that could obviously soften him up and set it up for one of these other closers in here. So pace will be very important in the turf, but on that course, at 1.5 mile, firm course, I like Highland Real. I still think he could be one of the best 12 furlong horses on grass or a firm course. Ulysses, 2 1:30 time form ratings in a row. Hit the board last time on the arc behind Enable. Tremendous form. He'll take a ton of money at 1.5 miles. You have to have him. This horse looked good last year, but he was a little inexperienced as a 3-year-old and didn't run as well. Well, he's a different horse this year, and I think you'll see a big performance. Seventh Heaven, another 12 furlong mare. Terrible soft course form, great firm course form, and if she gets the pace set up, she has some past performance and some running lines that would suggest that she can make an impact at this level if she gets the right pace set up at 12 furlongs. Cliffs and Mower is a very interesting 3-year-old that has run well in spot. In the Epsom Derby, he was second at 12 furlongs. He hasn't run that far since. So at 12 furlongs, he could be an up-and-comer if Coolmore runs him. I mean, he reminds me a lot of Magician, a horse that they brought over a few years ago to win this race that you didn't really respect as a 3-year-old based on his current form, but then you wondered, why was he in the race? Well, he won the race with a big turn of foot. Maybe that's Cliffs and Mower. And then Decorated Night, a horse that's had a good campaign, but to me, he's more of a 10-furlong horse, so I don't know, mile looks a little bit sharp for him, 1.5 miles looks maybe a little bit out of his scope based on his past performance, but he's been in tremendous form all year, so I think you have to have him in the top 5. And you'll notice Europe. That's what I think of the turf. I don't like the Americans at all, once again, in that 12 furlong turf. I think the Europeans are going to dominate.
All right, thank you, Joel. Thanks for putting all that work into showing some of these turf horses. Before I let you go, we got a lot of final works that are happening here. You're seeing some really good horses that are putting in their final preps. Tell me, who do you think looks the best so far just in their final preps?
Best thing to note is Arrogate. Remember we talked about 2 works back, how maybe it was his best work we've seen since he's come back from the Dubai World Cup. He took another forward step for me, John. That work this week, which again was the heavy lifting for him, loved the work from start to finish, loved the gallop. I mean, he basically galloped. They asked him to work 1.1 miles. If you look at the gallop, they had to pull him up on the front side. He came back around the far turn again. Wow. So it was a big work for him. I think most of the clockers there caught him even galloping out 1.1 miles, 151 and change. I just think he's doing a lot better. He's not the Arrogate last year that went into this race, in my view, based on the works. But he doesn't need to run a 120 Byron like he did last year either. Maybe a 110 gets it done. I still think in 1.25 miles, Arrogate is on top of his game. And Gunrunner, fantastic work. He couldn't be doing any better, John. My question still for Gunrunner is, if there's legitimate speed in the race, how's he going to fare against that class of horse with that type of pace scenario, stretching out another 1/8 of a mile to 1.25 miles where he can't be quite as brilliant?
All right, well, thank you, Joel. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you come back next week. It's time for us to give you our picks and who we think are going to win this year's Breeders' Cup races.